The rifle cracked through the thin mountain air, and Elias Thornhill's horse reared as the bullet splintered the pine just inches from his shoulder. He cursed under his breath, yanking the reins hard to the left, the animal's hooves churning up snow-dusted earth on the narrow trail leading into Thornhill Pass. Bandits, he figured, same as the whispers in Silver Gulch had warned. But this wasn't some random holdup. The shot came from too precise an angle, like the shooter knew exactly where he'd cut through the ridge at dawn. I flattened against the rocks, my heart pounding like a stampede in my chest. Elias, my brother, the stubborn fool who'd dragged me out here from Philadelphia with promises of gold and glory, had insisted we ride alone, no hired guns. Family first, he'd said, clapping my back with that grin of his, the one that hid the shadows in his eyes. Now as bullets whined past, I regretted every letter I'd written home swearing this venture would make us legends. The pass narrowed ahead, a choke point flanked by sheer granite walls that funneled the wind into a howl, and Elias spurred his mount forward, shouting for me to follow. We'd barely covered 50 yards when the second shot rang out, this one grazing Elias's hat and sending it tumbling into the gorge below. He didn't flinch, just leaned low and fired back blindly into the tree line, his colt barking defiance. "Keep moving, Theo," he yelled, voice steady despite the blood trickling from a shallow cut on his forehead where a ricochet had nicked him. I nodded, though he couldn't see it, my own revolver heavy in my gloved hand. The air smelled of gunpowder and pine sap, sharp and biting, and I scanned the slopes for movement, a flicker of shadow, anything to pinpoint the bastard. Elias had always been the brave one, charging into risks while I hung back, calculating odds like father taught us over chessboards back east. But out here in Colorado Territory 1859, with the Rockies clawing at the sky and winter's bite already in the wind, bravery felt like suicide. We'd come for the Thornhill claim, that vein of silver our grandfather staked before the fever took him. But the journey from Denver had been a gauntlet of blizzards and breakdowns. Now this ambush on the final leg just as the pass opened to our land. I kicked my horse into a gallop, the rhythm of hooves drowning out my thoughts. Elias veered right, toward a cluster of boulders that might offer cover, and I mirrored him, our shadows merging in the pale morning light. A third shot echoed, closer, and Elias's horse screamed, stumbling as lead tore into its flank. He vaulted off before it collapsed, rolling to his feet with rifle at the ready. I dismounted in a scramble, tethering my gelding to a stunted juniper and crouching beside him. "You see him?" I whispered, breath fogging between us. "Up there," Elias muttered, nodding toward a ledge 50 feet above where a puff of smoke lingered like a ghost. The shooter was methodical, not panicking. Probably one of Jedediah's men from the rival claim down valley. Jedediah Harlan, that snake, had been eyeing our stake since word spread of the assay reports. But this felt personal, the shots too well placed for claim jumpers. Elias chambered another round, his jaw set like iron. "We push through. Can't let him bottle us here." I wanted to argue, flank him, wait for dusk, but Elias was already moving, darting from rock to rock with the grace of a man who'd hunted these hills as a boy. I followed, pulse thundering, the weight of our packs, provisions, tools, the family Bible with its cursed entries, dragging at my shoulders. Grandfather's journal had warned of perils beyond weather and beasts, feuds, bad luck, the Thornhill shadow. Every wife in our line dead 9 months after vows. Fathers had withered in childbirth. Grandfathers in fever. Elias laughed it off as superstition. But as I sighted the ledge and squeezed off a warning shot, I wondered if the bloodline's toll extended to brothers now. The shooter fired again, the bullet chipping stone near my boot, and Elias returned fire with a roar that shook loose a cascade of pebbles. We gained ground, the trail widening just enough for hope, but the pass's echo amplified every sound, turning our advance into a deadly duet. Elias glanced back, eyes fierce. "We claim what's ours, Theo. No turning back." I nodded, gripping my gun tighter, the cold seeping through my coat as we pressed on, the ridge's promise and its ghosts waiting beyond. I gripped the reins tighter as the wagon lurched over the rutted trail, the Rocky Mountains looming like jagged teeth against the dawn sky. Elias Thornhill rode ahead on his bay mare, his broad shoulders cutting a silhouette that spoke of unyielding resolve. But I knew better, knew the shadows that clung to him like smoke from a dying fire. We'd left Denver at first light, chasing whispers of gold in the gulches beyond Black Hawk. But my mind wasn't on nuggets or claims. It was on the letter crumpled in my coat pocket, the one from his sister back east warning me about the Thornhill curse. Every wife dead 9 months after the vows. Coincidence, she'd called it. But her words trembled on the page. Elias glanced back, his weathered face cracking into a grin. You look like you've seen a ghost, Clara. This high air'll do that, clears the cobwebs or stirs 'em up. He was always like that, deflecting with humor. His voice rough as gravel but warm enough to thaw the chill in my bones. Brave to a fault. That's what they said about him in the saloons. The man who'd face down claim jumpers with nothing but a shovel and a stare. But I was cautious by nature. Raised on my father's farm where every decision weighed against the risk of ruin, and marrying Elias 3 weeks ago had felt like stepping off a cliff. The trail narrowed, forcing us single file through a stand of aspens, their leaves shivering in the wind like 1,000 pale coins. I wanted to ask him outright, about Mary, his first wife, gone in childbirth before her time, about Eliza, lost to fever exactly 9 months after their hurried wedding in 55. But the words stuck, tangled with the fear that loving him might seal my fate. Instead, I urged the mules forward, the wagon creaking under the weight of our supplies, picks, pans, a cradle for sifting gravel, and the cradle we hoped for someday, if the mountains didn't claim us first. By midday, we crested a ridge overlooking the gulch, a scar of red earth twisting through the pines. Elias dismounted, tethering his horse and scanning the valley with eyes sharp as a hawk's. There's water down there, and color in the streams if the old prospectors weren't lying. He pulled out his map, a hand-scrawled thing stained with coffee and ambition, and jabbed a finger at a fork in the river. We'll set camp here, stake our claim tomorrow. You game for panning, or you aiming to cook us into fortune? I laughed despite myself, swinging down from the wagon seat, my boots sinking into the soft loam. I'll pan if you promise not to drown in the first riffle. Last I checked, you're no swimmer. It was our rhythm, this easy banter, the kind that made the wilderness feel less vast. But as I unpacked the bedroll, a shadow flitted across the ground. Not from the clouds scudding overhead, but something darker, like a figure darting between the trees. I froze, heart thudding, and called out, Elias, did you see that? He straightened, hand drifting to the Colt at his hip, his wit sharpening into focus. Bear, cougar? We both knew the real threats out here. Not just beasts, but men, rivals who'd slit your throat for a likely spot. But the shadow didn't return, and after a tense minute, he shrugged it off. Wind's playing tricks. Let's get this fire going before the chill sets in. That night, as stars pricked the black canvas above, I lay awake beside him in the tent, his steady breathing a counterpoint to my racing thoughts. The letter burned in my mind. How each wife had carried a child, how the births had come poisoned, the babe stillborn or worse. Elias stirred, murmuring in his sleep, and I pressed closer, wondering if the curse was his burden or mine to bear. Tomorrow we'd dig into the earth, unearthing secrets of our own. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something in these mountains was already digging toward us. The next morning brought rain, a cold drizzle that turned the trail to mud and our plans to hasty adaptation. Elias rigged a lean-to from canvas and branches, his hands quick and sure, while I scouted the stream for a promising bend. The water ran swift, flecked with promise, tiny glints where the sun pierced the clouds. I knelt, dipping the pan, swirling the gravel with the rhythm he'd taught me. Lift, shake, settle. Grit coated my fingers, but there, a flake gold no bigger than a pinhead winking up at me. Elias! I shouted, holding it aloft as he slogged over, his hat brim dripping. His eyes lit with that boyish fire, the one that had drawn me to him across a crowded claim office. That's our start. We'll need more pans, finer mesh. A crack echoed through the gulch, not thunder but a rifle shot, splintering bark from the pine behind me. I dropped to the mud, heart slamming as Elias yanked me behind a boulder. Stay down, he hissed, drawing his pistol, scanning the ridge. Footsteps splashed upstream, deliberate and closing. Not an animal. Men. We crouched there, breaths ragged as two figures emerged from the mist. Rough-hewn prospectors, faces obscured by slouch hats, one cradling a repeating rifle. Thornhill, the taller one bellowed, voice carrying over the rain. This claim's ours. Been working it since spring. Pack up or we'll bury you with your gold. Elias's jaw set, his cautious side warring with the brave fool in him, and the lantern's flame guttered in the draft, casting jagged shadows across the ledger's yellowed pages. I traced my finger down the column of dates, each one a precise 9 months from wedding vows to a grave. Eleanor, 1842. Beatrice, 1847. Lydia, 1852. My heart hammered as I snapped the book shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the dim study. Father would kill me if he knew I'd pried into his locked drawer. But curiosity had always been my vice, sharper than any knife. Miss Thornhill? A soft knock at the door, and there was Clara. Her apron dusted with flour from the kitchen, eyes wide with that perpetual worry she wore like a shawl. She was the only servant who'd stayed on after Mother's passing. Not that Mother had been a wife to Father, just his sister, raising me after the accident that took our parents. Clara's loyalty was the family's quiet anchor, her hands calloused from years of scrubbing secrets away. I shoved the ledger back into the shadows of the desk. What is it? Your uncle's rider just came in from Denver. Says the train's delayed, more snow in the passes. Mr. Harlan won't make it before dark. Her voice trembled, not from the cold seeping through the cabin walls, but from the unspoken. Harlan, the suitor Father had all but promised me to, the one who could bring respectability to our crumbling ranch. 9 months. The words clawed at my thoughts. I stood smoothing my skirt, forcing a smile that felt like grit in my teeth. Good, gives us time. Time for what? To run? To confront Father about the pattern I'd just unearthed? The ranch sprawled under Colorado's relentless sky, its barbed wire fences a joke against the wolves that howled at night. But it was ours, or what was left after the debts. Father claimed the land was cursed, blighted by some old Comanche hex from the gold rush days. But ledgers didn't lie. People did. Clara hesitated, twisting her hands. You shouldn't be alone with those books, miss. Your father, he gets that look when things go missing. Let him. My voice came out steadier than I felt, brave words for a girl of 19. Schooled in Boston etiquette, but forged in these mountains' unforgiving stone. I grabbed my coat from the hook, the wool heavy with the scent of pine and regret. I'm going to the barn. Check on the horses before the storm hits. Outside, the wind whipped snowflakes like needles against my face. The barn loomed at the edge of the yard, its roof sagging under last night's fresh fall. I pushed through the doors, the warmth of hay and animal breath a brief reprieve. Shadow, my mare, nickered softly, her dark eyes reflecting the lantern I hung on a post. She was the one constant, bought with my own savings from selling wildflowers to prospectors. I ran a hand along her flank, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing. If only humans were so simple. A crunch of boots in the snow pulled me up short. Not Clara, too heavy. I spun, hand instinctively reaching for the pitchfork leaning nearby. Father emerged from the gloom, his beard frosted white, eyes narrowed under the brim of his hat. He was a bear of a man, once unbreakable, now hollowed by loss he never named. Out here in the cold again, Eliza? His voice rumbled, not angry but probing, like he could smell the guilt on me. Just thinking. I kept my grip loose on the pitchfork, but my pulse raced. Had he seen me with the ledger? The dates burned in my mind, always a birth that never came, a stillborn shadow over each union. He stepped closer, the lantern light carving deep lines in his face. Harlan's a good man. Steady. He'll provide for you. Keep this place from the banker's hands. He paused, glancing at Shadow. Your mother would have wanted it. Mother, not a wife, but close enough to the fire. I swallowed the question clawing up my throat. And if I don't want steady, what if there's more to it than land and legacy? His laugh was bitter like wind through dead grass. In these parts, girl, legacy's all we've got. The bloodline ends with fools who question it. He turned to leave, but not before I saw the flicker in his eyes. Fear or warning. As the barn door creaked shut behind him, I leaned against Shadow, the mare's warmth seeping through my gloves. 9 months. If Harlan came, if I said yes, would I be next? The storm howled louder, rattling the walls, and for the first time I wondered if the real curse wasn't in the blood, but in the silence we all kept. I needed proof, something beyond ink and dates. Tomorrow I'd ride to the old graveyard at dawn, before the snow buried the markers forever. Clara could cover for me, but as the night deepened, a chill settled that no fire could touch, the kind that whispered of secrets willing to kill to stay buried. I traced my finger down the column of dates, each one a gravestone marker. Eliza, wed in spring of 42, gone by winter's end. Margaret vows in 48, buried come the harvest moon, 9 months precise as a clockmaker's gear. My pulse hammered against my ribs as I slammed the book shut, the dust motes swirling like ghosts in the attic air. Damn it all, I muttered, shoving the ledger into my satchel. The Thornhill estate creaked around me, floorboards groaning underfoot like they were alive with secrets. I'd slipped in through the servant's door at dusk, after old man Harlan had retired to his study with that perpetual scowl. He was the last of the line now, childless widower, but the bloodline's curse, if that's what it was, hung over this place like fog off the Platte River. As the new deputy in Silver Gulch, I'd come sniffing for answers, not because of the whispers in the saloon, but because my own sister Clara had set her cap for Harlan's nephew, young Tobias, due to arrive any day. Footsteps echoed from the hall below, heavy, deliberate. I froze, hand drifting to the revolver at my belt. The attic stairs were narrow, a trap if I was cornered. Heart thudding, I edged toward the dormer window, peering out at the moonlit yard. No sign of movement, but those steps were climbing now. Slow and sure, I blew out the lantern, plunging the space into inky black, and crouched behind a stack of crates that smelled of mothballs and forgotten linens. The door creaked open, a sliver of light spilling in from the hall. "Who's there?" a voice rasped. Harlan's, laced with gravel from years of pipe smoke and suspicion. I held my breath, the weight of the satchel pressing into my thigh. He'd find me if I moved. The floor betrayed every shift. Memories flashed. My father's tales of the Thornhills, pioneers who'd struck gold in these mountains but paid in blood. Every wife heavy with child dead in childbirth or fever, exactly 9 months after the ring. Coincidence? Or something darker? Like the old Comanche curses the prospectors muttered about. Harlan's silhouette filled the doorway, his lantern swinging like a pendulum. "I know you're up here, boy. Saw your horse tethered by the stable." His voice sharpened, and he took a step inside, boots thudding. I weighed my options, talk my way out, or bolt. Deputy badge or no, Harlan Thornhill owned half the county. Crossing him meant exile or worse, but Clara's face swam in my mind, her laugh bright against the grim reality of this town. I couldn't let her walk into that web. Rising slow, hands visible, I stepped into the light. "Just borrowing a light for my pipe, Mr. Thornhill." Got turned around in the dark. Lie hung thin, but my voice stayed steady, honed from saloon brawls and trail dust. His eyes narrowed, lantern lifting to scan my face. Age had carved deep lines into his weathered skin, but there was steel there unbent. Deputy Hale sneaking like a thief in my own house. "What's your game?" He didn't lower the light, and I caught the glint of a derringer in his other hand, half concealed by his coat. I met his gaze, chin up. "The game's the same one that's haunted your family for decades. Dates don't lie, sir. 9 months every time. Folks are talking poison hexes, whatever it is. My sister's name's in the wind with your nephew's. I aim to know why before she says I do." Harlan's laugh was a dry bark, echoing off the rafters. He holstered the derringer but didn't back away. "Superstitious fool. It's the mountains, the water, bad blood from the mines. Not some ghost story." Yet his eyes flicked to the satchel, and I saw the flicker of doubt, the same that gnawed at me. He waved the lantern toward the stairs. "Get out. But if you're set on digging, start with the well. Deeper than you think." I nodded, slipping past him, the air thick with unspoken threats. Outside, the night air bit cold. Stars sharp overhead like accusations. Mounting my horse, I glanced back at the looming silhouette of the house, its windows, dark eyes watching. The ledger burned in my mind, patterns too neat for chance. Tomorrow I'd ride to the old claims, talk to the miners who'd worked the Thornhill veins. But Harlan's words lingered, the well. What buried truth festered there? Dawn broke gray over the ridges as I pushed the mare harder, the trail winding toward the abandoned shafts. Clara's letter from last week weighed in my pocket. "He's kind, Elias. A fresh start." Kind or not, the bloodline's shadow stretched long. I spurred on, the first doubts creeping in, not of the curse but of what I'd unearthed to break it. The revolver felt heavier now, a promise of reckonings yet to come. The lantern's flame guttered in the draft, casting jagged shadows across the study walls as I rifled through Elias Thornhill's ledgers. My fingers, ink-stained and trembling, paused on a yellowed page dated 1842. There it was again, that precise notation. Union blessed, 9 moons to fruition. The words blurred, not from the poor light, but from the cold certainty settling in my gut. Elias's first wife, Margaret, had marked her wedding with such optimism, only to wither away in childbirth, or so the town whispered. But 9 months exact? No accident, no fever's whim. I slammed the book shut, heart pounding like a miner's pick against quartz. Footsteps echoed from the hallway, deliberate and unhurried. I shoved the ledger back into the desk drawer, but not before glimpsing a loose sketch tucked inside. A crude map of the Thornhill claim, with an X over the old silver vein, long thought played out. The door creaked open, and there stood Josiah, Elias's brother, his face a mask of weathered leather under the brim of his hat. He didn't knock. In this house, privacy was a luxury for fools. "Still poking around, Eliza?" His voice was gravel, laced with that false camaraderie he'd worn since I arrived 2 months past. Brave as I tried to be, caution won out. I straightened, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Just familiarizing myself with the books. Elias is particular about the accounts. Josiah chuckled, low and miry, stepping inside to lean against the mantel. The fire spat embers, illuminating the scar snaking down his cheek, a remnant from some prospecting brawl years back. Particular eye. "But you're no Greenhorn City girl, are you? Heard you kept books for that lawyer back east." He eyed me like a claim jumper sizing up another stake. Wit had always been my shield. I tilted my head, voice light. "And you've kept this ranch afloat through worse than lean winters. We make a fine pair of busybodies." He didn't laugh. Instead, he crossed to the desk, his boot nudging the chair I'd vacated. "Elias trusts you. That's more than most." The words hung heavy with implication. I thought of the portrait in the parlor. Elias's second wife, Clara, radiant in her gown, gone the same interval after vows. The town called it a curse, the Thornhill bloodline tainted by some Comanche hex from the old days. But I'd seen no spirits, only men with secrets. Josiah's hand lingered on the drawer I'd just closed. Had he seen? Outside, the wind howled through the pines, rattling the window panes like bones in a sack. I needed air, clarity, anything to shake the dread coiling tighter. "Walk with me to the barn? The horses need checking before the storm hits full." It was half-truth. Thunder, my mare, had been skittish since dawn, but really I wanted him away from those papers. Josiah nodded, grabbing his coat from the hook. "Lead on, Mrs. Thornhill." The title still chafed, a noose of lace and promise. We stepped into the night, the cold biting through my shawl like accusation. The path to the barn wound past the family plot, where 3 headstones gleamed under the moon. Margaret, Clara, and now the space reserved for me, or so the whispers said. 9 months. I'd felt the first flutters last week, a secret joy twisted by fear. Was it poison in the well or something darker, like the silver mine's collapse that killed Elias's father? In the barn, the air smelled of hay and horse sweat. Thunder nickered, tossing her head as I approached. Josiah lit a lantern, its glow picking out the tools hung neat on the walls. Picks, shovels, a coiled rope that looked rarely used. "You ever wonder about that vein?" I asked, stroking Thunder's flank to steady my hands. "The one they sealed after the cave-in?" His eyes narrowed, reflecting the flame. "Wonder, it's buried history. Why dig it up?" But his voice cracked just a hair and I pressed. "Because history repeats if you let it." Margaret wrote of strange dust from the mine, silver laced with something foul. And Clara, she miscarried twice before the end. Josiah turned away, busying himself with a bridle. Women's troubles. The Lord's will. But his shoulders tensed, betraying the lie. I remembered the map, the X like a grave marker. Grit surged through me. Elias's grit, the kind that tamed wild Colorado. I wouldn't fade like the others. "Show me the entrance tomorrow." "Elias won't mind." He froze, then laughed, sharp as a spur. "You're bolder than you look, Eliza, but some doors stay shut for a reason." As he left, the barn door swinging behind him, I whispered to Thunder, "We'll open them anyway." The storm broke then, rain lashing the roof like judgment, and in the downpour, I vowed whatever haunted the Thornhills, it ended with me. But deep down the question gnawed. Had Josiah just drawn his own line in the dirt? I gripped the lantern tighter, its flame flickering like a heartbeat against the damp walls of the old Thornhill mine shaft. The air down here was thick with the scent of wet earth and something sharper. Sulfur, maybe, or the rot of forgotten timber. Elias Thornhill trudged ahead, his broad shoulders cutting through the shadows, but I could see the hesitation in his step, the way he glanced back at me every few paces. "You sure about this, Harlan?" he muttered, his voice echoing low. "Pa's stories always said the vein ran deep, but nobody's come this far since '52. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Not since I'd married into this cursed family 6 months back. Eliza's face haunted me, pale and still in her coffin, exactly 9 months after their wedding, just like the others before her. The town whispered of bad luck, of the mountains claiming what was theirs, but I knew better. I'd seen the ledgers in the attic, the patterns too neat for coincidence. And now with my own wife Clara starting to show the signs, faint spells, a weariness that clung like fog, I'd dragged Elias down here to prove it wasn't fate. It was something buried, something the Thornhills had unearthed long ago. "Keep moving," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My hand rested on the revolver at my hip, more for comfort than threat. The shaft narrowed, forcing us to duck under jagged overhangs, and I swear the walls pulsed with the distant rumble of the river above. We'd entered through the collapsed adit on the north ridge, the one the old prospectors avoided after the flood of 47. Elias had the map, yellowed and creased, marked with his grandfather's scrawl, "Silver's secret, do not wake." A loose rock skittered under my boot, and I froze as it clattered into the darkness. From deeper in, a sound answered, not an echo, but a scrape like claws on stone. Elias spun, his pickaxe raised. What the hell was that? Probably just settling, I lied, but my pulse thrummed in my ears. Clara's words echoed in my mind, Harlan the dreams, babies crying in the earth. I'd dismissed them as nerves, but now with the lantern light dancing on veins of quartz that gleamed unnaturally blue, doubt gnawed at me. We pressed on, the tunnel opening into a chamber where the air grew colder, heavier. Piles of ore sacks slumped against the walls, their contents spilled like frozen entrails. Elias knelt by one, brushing away dust. "Look here, it's loaded with it. Real silver, pure as I've ever seen." His eyes lit with that Thornhill greed, the same spark that had doomed his father, his uncle, all of them. But as he pried open a crate, a glint caught my eye. Not metal, but bone. Small, fragile. A child's rib, etched with faint lines that might have been runes or just cracks from the fall. I snatched it up, turning it in the light. This isn't from a cave-in. It's carved. My stomach twisted. The stories flooded back. The first Mrs. Thornhill dead in childbirth, her babe stillborn with skin like quartz. The second, hemorrhaging after 9 months, whispering of shadows in her belly. Every wife, every heir claimed by the mountain. Elias stood face ashen. "We need to get out now." But before he could move, the scrape returned, closer, rhythmic. The lantern sputtered, and in its dying glow I saw them. Shapes slithering from the cracks, not rats or bats, but tendrils of silver-blue ore, coiling like veins, come alive. They lashed out, wrapping Elias's ankle, pulling him down with a yelp. I fired the revolver, the shot deafening in the chamber. Sparks flew, but the tendrils only tightened, dragging him toward a fissure in the floor. "Harlan!" he shouted, clawing at the dirt. I lunged, grabbing his arm, my muscles burning as I hauled against the pull. The bone slipped from my pocket, clinking against stone, and the tendrils recoiled. Just for a second. "Throw it!" I gasped, shoving the lantern toward him. He understood, hurling the bone into the fissure. A shriek ripped through the air, unearthly and raw, like metal grinding on bone. The tendrils withered, crumbling to dust, and the chamber fell silent. We scrambled back the way we'd come, gasping, covered in grime. Elias limped, his boot torn, but alive. "What was that thing?" He panted as we emerged into the night. The stars cold overhead. I didn't answer. Clara waited at home, her belly swelling with the next Thornhill air. If the mountain hungered for bloodlines, we'd just poked its eye. But the cost, Elias's limp, the bone's secrets, lingered like a promise of more to come. I touched the revolver, wondering if bullets would be enough next time. I gripped the lantern tighter as the mineshaft's chill seeped into my bones, the flame flickering like it knew we were fools for coming down here alone. Sarah's hand trembled in mine, her breath coming in shallow bursts that echoed off the damp walls. We'd slipped away from the ranch at dusk, driven by that cursed ledger I'd found hidden in Father's desk. Pages yellowed with dates and names, every entry ending the same. 9 months, then a grave. My own wedding to her was barely 3 weeks past, and the weight of it pressed on me like the collapsing timbers overhead. "Elias, this is madness," she whispered, her voice cracking as we rounded a bend. The air grew thicker, laced with the metallic tang of old ore and something fouler like rot long buried. I wanted to turn back, to pretend the stories were just superstitious rot from the miners, but the numbers didn't lie. My mother, my aunt, even grandmother Eliza, all gone precisely when a child should have quickened. No fever, no accident, just silence. We pressed on, my boots crunching over loose gravel. The lantern light caught a glint ahead, a rusted iron door half ajar, barring what the old hands called the Devil's Vein. Legend had it the Thornhill struck silver there first, Back when Colorado was just wild claims and grizzly country, but at a price. Blood for ore, they said. I shoved the door with my shoulder. It groaned open, revealing a chamber where veins of quartz spiderwebbed the rock like frozen lightning. Sarah gasped, pointing. In the center, half buried under a pile of shattered crates, lay a wooden box, its lid carved with the family crest. A thorned rose, wilted. My heart hammered as I knelt, prying it free. Inside, not gold or gems, but letters tied with faded ribbon and a small vial of dark liquid, stoppered with wax. The topmost letter was in Father's hand. The pact holds. No heir without sacrifice. Forgive me, son. Before I could read more, a low rumble shook the shaft. Dust sifted from the ceiling, and Sarah yanked my arm. Elias, listen. Far behind us, the scrape of boots. Voices muffled but urgent. The ranch hands? Or worse, someone who'd followed us from town, whispering about the curse to scare off settlers. We'd planned to burn the evidence tonight and the cycle before it claimed her. But now our escape route narrowed with every tremor. I stuffed the letters into my coat, corking the vial in my pocket. It felt warm, unnaturally so, against my chest. We go deeper, I said, hating the words even as they left my lips. There had to be another way out, an old adit the maps didn't show. Sarah nodded, her eyes fierce despite the fear, and we plunged into the shadows beyond the chamber. The rumble grew, stones clattering like bones, and I wondered if the mine itself was the Thornhill legacy, swallowing secrets, demanding payment in flesh. As we scrambled over a fallen beam, slick with seepage, Sarah stumbled, her skirt catching on jagged rock. I caught her just in time, but the lantern swung wild, shattering against the wall. Darkness rushed in like floodwater, broken only by the faint glow of phosphorescent fungi clinging to the walls. Keep moving, I urged, my voice steadier than I felt. In the black, her hand was my anchor, but the vial burned hotter, a reminder that some debts couldn't be outrun. We emerged into a narrower tunnel, the air turning stale, and that's when the voices sharpened. Closer now, calling our names with an edge that wasn't concern. Betrayal? Or the curse manifesting in MN greedy for the silver we'd uncover? I pulled Sarah behind an outcrop, heart pounding as footsteps echoed nearer. The plan had backfired spectacularly. We'd come for answers, but all we'd stirred was the grave. The lantern's flame flickered as I pried open the rusted lock on the attic trunk. My fingers slick with sweat despite the chill seeping through the floorboards. Dust motes danced in the dim light, and there it was, Elias's great-grandfather's journal, its leather cover cracked like old skin. I hadn't told Elias I was coming up here. He'd warned me the attic was off limits, his voice tight with that unspoken fear he carried like a shadow. But after 6 months of marriage, with my belly just starting to round and the whispers in town growing louder, I couldn't wait any longer. Every Thornhill wife before me had quickened with child, only to wither away 9 months to the day. I wasn't about to join them without a fight. The pages smelled of mildew and secrets as I flipped through, my heart pounding against my ribs. Elias's ancestor, Jeremiah Thornhill, had arrived in these Colorado mountains in 1820, staking his claim on this god-forsaken silver vein with nothing but grit and a sharp's rifle. The entries started innocent enough, tales of hauling ore from the mine, trading pelts with Ute traders, building the cabin that still stood below. But then came the marriages. First wife Abigail, dead in childbirth after 9 months on the dot. Second Eliza, no relation to me, poisoned by bad water from the stream exactly 9 months after vows. Jeremiah's scrawl grew erratic, blaming curses, bad luck, even the mountains themselves. The vein takes its toll, he wrote. It demands blood for silver. A floorboard creaked downstairs and I froze, the journal heavy in my lap. Elias's boots on the stairs, he was home early from the claim. I shoved the book back into the trunk, slamming the lid just as his shadow fell across the attic door. Clara? What in blazes are you doing up here? His voice was rough, edged with worry, his broad frame filling the doorway. He was all muscle from years in the mines, his face weathered like the rock he chipped away at daily. But his eyes, those soft hazel eyes, betrayed the man who'd sworn to protect me from his family's doom. I needed air, I lied, brushing dust from my skirt as I stood, forcing a smile. My hand instinctively went to my abdomen, where our child kicked faintly, a reminder of the clock ticking down. 3 months left. Elias crossed the room in 2 strides, his calloused hand gentle on my arm. You look pale. Is it the babe? He didn't know about the journal, not yet. I'd found scraps of the story in town. Old-timers at the saloon muttering about Jeremiah's silver curse, how the mine's water ran tainted, seeping arsenic from the ore. But Elias dismissed it all as superstition, clinging to the life his bloodline had built. We descended the narrow stairs in silence, the cabin's warmth wrapping around us like a fragile blanket. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, carrying the distant rumble of thunder. Elias stoked the fire, his movements deliberate, while I busied myself with supper, venison stew from the haunch he'd brought back yesterday. "Tell me what's eating at you," he said finally, settling at the table, his gaze steady. I hesitated, the weight of the journal's words pressing on me. If it was the mine's poison, slow and insidious, building in the blood over those exact 9 months, then every meal, every sip from the well could be killing me. But accusing his legacy outright? That would shatter him. "It's nothing," I murmured, ladling stew into bowls. But as we ate, the storm broke, rain lashing the windows like accusations. Elias reached for my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my knuckles. "We're in this together, Clara, whatever it is." His words stirred something fierce in me, the same grit that had driven me west from Pennsylvania, leaving a widowed mother and a dull life behind. I wasn't some fragile mail-order bride. I'd learned to shoot, to track, to survive. If the Thornhill bloodline was poisoned by silver, I'd find a way to purge it. That night, as Elias slept beside me, his snores steady, I slipped from the bed and lit a candle by the window. The rain had eased, leaving the mountains shrouded in mist. I thought of the Ute woman in town, the one who'd traded herbs for pelts last spring. She'd spoken of roots that cleansed the blood, of waters purer than what ran from our claim. Tomorrow I'd ride out at dawn, tell Elias I was gathering wild greens for the babe. But first I needed proof. Quietly I filled a small vial from the well bucket, corking it tight. If arsenic was the killer, a prospector in Leadville could test it, discreetly for a price. Dawn came gray and sodden, the trail to town a mud-choked mess. Elias pressed a kiss to my forehead before heading to the mine, oblivious. "Be careful," he called over his shoulder. I nodded, tying my mare's reins and urging her forward. The ride took hours, the vial burning against my thigh like a guilty secret. By midday, Leadville's ramshackle streets came into view, miners and merchants hustling through the drizzle. I found the assayer's shack behind the livery, a grizzled man named Harlan who squinted at me through spectacles. "Water from the claim?" he grunted, swirling the vial under a lens after I'd spun a tale about checking for gold traces. His face darkened as he added reagents, the liquid shifting to a murky yellow. "Arsenic, ma'am. High levels. Common in silver country. Seeps in slow, builds up." The lantern's flame guttered as I slammed the journal shut, my fingers smudged with ink that smelled faintly of mildew and regret. Elias Thornhill's words had burrowed into me like ticks on a miner's back. Every entry a confession wrapped in denial. Detailing the slow poison he fed his brides under the guise of tonics for delicate constitutions. 9 months, always 9. Time to the swell of a belly that never quickened with life. I glanced at the bedroom door, half expecting it to creak open on its own. But the ranch house held its breath in the pre-dawn chill of Colorado's high plains. My hands trembled as I tucked the journal into my satchel, the leather flap snapping like a judge's gavel. I'd come here as Abigail, the third cousin twice removed, spinning tales of distant kin to gain entry as the new housekeeper. But truth was a sharper blade. I was Eliza's sister, the one who survived the fever that took our parents, and I'd ridden from Denver with a derringer in my boot and vengeance in my veins. Elias thought me timid, a mouse in calico. But tonight, with his snores rumbling from the master suite, I felt the mouse sharpen its teeth. The floorboards whispered under my stockinged feet as I crept down the hall, the air thick with the scent of sagebrush seeping through the cracks. Outside, the wind howled like the ghosts of those women, Margaret with her laugh like wind chimes, Louisa, who painted wildflowers on the walls, and Eliza, my bold-hearted sister, who dreamed of taming this cursed land. Elias had buried them all in the family plot behind the barn, markers etched with lies about complications and God's will. I paused at the kitchen threshold, my pulse a drumbeat against my ribs. The vial, his secret hidden in the pantry behind jars of preserves, waited like a serpent coiled in the dark. I eased the pantry door open, the hinges sighing softly. Moonlight slanted through the window, silvering the shelves lined with dusty bottles and sacks of flour. There, wedged between a crock of salt pork and a tin of coffee, was the small glass vial, stoppered with wax. Its contents a murky amber that caught the light like trapped sunlight. My breath hitched. Belladonna, the journal had named it, diluted just enough to mimic the aches of pregnancy, building to a fatal bloom in the 9th month. I'd read of it in the apothecary's ledgers back east. Deadly Nightshade, the widow's helper. Elias, with his mining fortune and twisted lineage, had turned it into a family tradition, ensuring no heir diluted the Thornhill blood. Fingers closing around the vial, I felt its cool weight, a promise of justice. But footsteps thudded from the hall, heavy, deliberate. Elias. I froze, heart slamming like a prospector's pick. Had he woken? Seen the lantern's glow? I shoved the vial into my pocket and spun, grabbing a rolling pin from the counter as the door swung wide. He filled the frame, his nightshirt rumpled, eyes bleary but sharpening on me like a hawk spotting prey. Abigail? What devilry are you about at this hour? His voice was gravel, laced with the suspicion that had always simmered beneath his courtly manners. I raised the rolling pin, steady despite the quake in my knees. It's over, Elias. I know what you did to them, to Eliza. The name hung between us, a spark to dry tinder. His face twisted, not in fear, but in the cold calculation I'd glimpsed in his ledgers, tallying claims and corpses alike. He stepped forward, hands empty but posture coiled. Eliza, that name means nothing. You're delirious, girl. Put that down before you hurt yourself. But his gaze flicked to my pocket where the vial's shape bulged against the fabric. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows like impatient fingers. I backed toward the rear door, the rolling pin gripped white-knuckled. Every wife 9 months to the day. You poisoned them, you monster. For what? To keep your gold unshared? My voice cracked, but I held his stare, channeling Eliza's fire. The sister who'd taught me to shoot, to stand unbowed. Elias laughed, a low rumble that chilled deeper than the mountain air. Ingenuity, my dear. The Thornhills built this empire on hard choices. Women weaken legacies. He lunged then, faster than his bulk suggested, one hand snatching for my arm while the other reached for the knife block on the table. I swung the rolling pin, connecting with his shoulder in a crack of wood on bone. He grunted, staggering, but closed the distance, his fingers grazing my wrist. We grappled, the vial digging into my thigh like a talisman. The kitchen spun in shadows, spilled flour clouding the air like smoke from a claim fire. I twisted free, elbowing his gut, and bolted for the door, flinging it open to the night. Cold air slapped my face as I ran into the yard, boots forgotten, the grass sharp underfoot. Elias bellowed behind me, his silhouette bursting through the doorway, fury propelling him like a stampede. The barn loomed ahead, its doors ajar, promising cover. But as I sprinted, the vial slipped from my pocket, shattering on the frozen earth in a hiss of liquid fire. The smell hit me, bitter, floral, deadly. Evidence gone, but the truth burned brighter. I reached the barn, diving into the hay-scented gloom, and crouched behind a stall. Elias's boots crunched outside, circling. You can't. The lantern's flame guttered as I slammed the cabin door behind me, the wind howling like a banshee through the aspen groves. My boots crunched over frost-rimed gravel, heart-pounding from what I'd just uncovered in Elias Thornhill's journal. Pages yellowed and brittle, detailing not just the deaths but the patterns, the deliberate timings that no curse could explain. 9 months, every one of them, like clockwork, birthing something darker than a child. I gripped the revolver in my coat pocket, its weight a cold comfort against the chill seeping into my bones. If I was right, the next victim, Elias's current bride, Clara, had hours, maybe less, before the pattern repeated. I spurred my horse down the rutted trail toward the Thornhill ranch, the Rockies looming black against a starless sky. The air bit sharp, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke from the miners' camps. Why had I come to this godforsaken territory? Chasing gold, they said, but for me it was whispers of the Thornhill name. A family legend my grandmother spun by the fire back east. Bloodlines tainted, she'd croaked, eyes gleaming. Wives dropped like autumn leaves, heavy with secrets. I'd laughed it off as superstition then, but now, with Elias's words burning in my mind, the seed must take root, or the line ends. I wondered if she'd known more than she let on. The ranch lights flickered into view, a lone beacon in the valley. I dismounted quietly, tying the horse to a fence post warped by years of neglect. Voices drifted from the main house, Elias's low rumble, Clara's softer tone laced with fear. I crept closer, skirting the corral where skeletal cattle lowed mournfully. Peering through a grimy window, I saw them. Elias, tall and gaunt with that perpetual shadow under his eyes, pacing before the hearth. Clara sat in a rocker, her belly swollen under a woolen shawl, hands clasped white-knuckled over it. 9 months, exactly. Can't keep pretending, Clara was saying, her voice trembling but edged with steel. The pain started at dawn, Elias. It's too soon. Our baby's not ready. He stopped, his back to her, fists clenched. It has to be. The bloodline demands it. Your sisters, my sisters are dead because of you. She surged to her feet, knocking over a side table with a crash. The room spun in my vision as I pressed closer, breath fogging the glass. Elias whirled, his face a mask of desperation. They chose this, same as you. The Thornhill survived through sacrifice. Without the heir, we're nothing. Cursed to fade like those prospectors who came and went. I couldn't wait any longer. Bursting through the door, I leveled the revolver at him, the metallic click echoing like judgment. Step away from her, Thornhill. I know what you've done. The room froze. Elias's eyes widened, recognition dawning slow, like molasses. You, the Easterner with too many questions. What the hell are you doing here? Clara gasped, one hand flying to her mouth, the other steadying herself against the wall. Who? Saving you, I said, voice steady despite the tremor in my gut. That journal of yours, Elias, it's no family Bible. It's a confession. The herbs you brew, the rituals to force the birth early, every wife poisoned slow to mimic the 9-month mark, all to cover your madness. The bloodline is just your excuse to kill and remarry, hoarding the land claims. He laughed, a hollow bark that didn't reach his eyes. Madness. This valley's soaked in it. The gold veins run dry without strong hands and without heirs. The deeds slip away to vultures like you. They all knew. Consented even for the promise of legacy. Liar, Clara whispered, sinking back into the chair as a contraction twisted her face. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The labor was real, but accelerated by whatever devil's tonic he'd fed her. I advanced, gun unwavering. The first wife, 1832. Journal says she perished in childbed, but the dates match your claim filings. You waited the months, induced the birth with belladonna and forced her to deliver early. The baby dies, she follows, and you inherit her dowry land. Rinse and repeat. 5 times now. But Clara, here's fighting it. Elias lunged for a sideboard drawer, but I fired a warning shot into the floorboards, splintering wood. He froze, hands raised. You think you can stop it? The pattern's set. Touch her, and you're part of it. Outside, thunder cracked, rain lashing the windows like accusations. Clara moaned, gripping the armrests. I had to get her out, but the storm would make the trail a river of mud. Clara, can you ride? We head for Silverton. Doc there owes me a favor. She nodded weakly, determination flickering in her eyes. Anything to end this. As Elias snarled and made a desperate grab for her, I tackled him, the gun skittering across the floor. We grappled in the firelight, his fingers clawing at my throat, my mind racing through the journal's clues. The hidden cache of vials in the root cellar, the midwife he'd paid off years ago. He was stronger than he looked, fueled by fanaticism, but I was younger, driven by the grit that had carried me west. A knee to his gut dropped him gasping, and I retrieved the revolver, pressing it to his temple. It's over. The lantern's flame guttered as I shoved open the attic door, the hinges screaming like a banshee in the night. Dust motes swirled in the beam, and there she was, Elias Thornhill's 4th wife, or what was left of her, slumped against the rafters with eyes wide and glassy, her belly swollen as if time itself had bloated her from within. 9 months right on the dot, just like the others. My heart hammered, not from fear, but from the cold certainty that whatever killed her wasn't done with us yet. I backed away, my boot catching on a loose floorboard that splintered underfoot. Elias, I called down the stairs, my voice rough from the dry mountain air. He'd been pacing the parlor below, insisting we search the old house alone. No sheriff, no outsiders, to keep the family's shame buried. Foolish man, thinking secrets could stay that way in a place like Thornhill Ranch, where the wind carried whispers from the mine shafts. He bounded up 2 steps at a time, his face paling when he saw her. God almighty, no, he muttered, crossing himself even though he'd sworn off faith years ago. Elias was built like the Rockies themselves, broad, unyielding. But grief had carved lines into him deeper than any pickaxe. His wife Clara was due in 2 months. We'd come here chasing rumors of a pattern. A bloodline taint that turned pregnancies into graves. Me, a drifter named Jack Harlan, with a nose for trouble and a grudge against curses that smelled more like poison than hexes. We'd pieced it together over campfires, the arsenic in the well water laced by Elias's own kin to claim the land. His uncle, jealous of the silver veins, had started it generations back, dosing the brides to mimic divine retribution. But tonight's discovery shattered our plan. We'd meant to confront the last living relative, old Harlan Thornhill himself, tucked away in the root cellar. Instead, we'd found this horror first. Elias knelt, touching her cold hand. She was screaming earlier. I thought it was the wind. His voice cracked, and I saw the doubt flicker. Had he ignored the signs to protect his legacy? Get up, I said, gripping his shoulder. The well's our next stop. If we don't seal it now, Clara's next. But as we turned, a shadow shifted in the corner, a figure hooded and hunched, slipping through a hidden panel in the wall. Elias lunged, but the intruder was gone, leaving behind a faint scent of sulfur and earth. We barreled down the stairs, lanterns swinging wildly, casting our shadows like demons on the walls. Outside, the Colorado night pressed in, stars sharp as knife points over the sagebrush. My mind raced. The rival miners from Silver Gulch had been sniffing around, whispering about claiming the ranch after another tragedy. Was this their hand, accelerating the curse to bury the truth forever? Elias grabbed a rifle from the rack by the door. We ride for the well. Now. His eyes burned with that Thornhill grit, the kind that had tamed these wilds but blinded men to their own poison. I nodded, mounting my horse as thunder rumbled distant in the peaks. But deep down, I wondered if we'd already drunk from the tainted spring. My throat burned, a subtle ache I'd dismissed as trail dust. The stakes weren't just land anymore. They were our lives ticking down like a miner's fuse. As we spurred into the dark, I felt the weight of every dead wife pressing on us, urging us toward a reckoning that might claim us all. The lantern's flame guttered in the draft, seeping through the cabin's warped boards, casting jagged shadows that clawed at the walls like the fingers of the dead. I gripped the iron poker from the hearth, its weight a cold comfort in my sweating palm, as the floorboards creaked under footsteps that weren't mine. Eliza's journal lay open on the table, its pages splayed like a gutted fish, the ink of her final entry still smudged from my frantic reading. It's not the bloodline. It's him. The first Elias buried it all in the mineshaft, but it hungers still. I backed toward the door, heart hammering against my ribs. 9 months. That's all it had been since I'd whispered my vows to Thomas Thornhill in the dusty chapel of Silver Gulch. The town's whispers already buzzing like flies around a carcass. Every wife before me, Lillian in 52, Margaret in 47, even old man Thornhill's first, Abigail, back when Colorado was just wild land and prospector dreams, gone exactly then. Their bellies swollen with what the midwife called the family blessing, their bodies cold before dawn broke. Thomas had sworn it was fever, bad water from the streams, the harsh altitude claiming the fragile. But the dates didn't lie, etched in the family Bible like accusations. The footsteps paused. I swung the poker in a wide arc, the air whistling through its path. "Show yourself!" My voice cracked, thinner than I intended, but I wouldn't cower. Not after piecing it together in the attic trunk. Letters from a Comanche shaman warning of a desecrated burial ground under the Thornhill claim. The silver vein they'd struck running red with more than ore. Thomas had laughed it off that afternoon, his eyes too bright, too evasive as he shoveled coal into the stove. Superstition, love. We're building something here. But I'd seen the fresh dirt on his boots, the way he avoided the old mine entrance on the ridge. A silhouette filled the doorway, tall and unyielding, the brim of his hat slicing the moonlight. Thomas. His face was a mask of shadow, but I knew the set of his jaw, the way his hands flexed like they itched for something to hold. "Mary," he said, soft as a prayer, stepping inside. The door thudded shut behind him, sealing us in with the ghosts. "Put that down. You're imagining things." I didn't. The poker trembled, but I held it steady, pointing it at his chest. The journal. Eliza wrote it all. How your great-grandfather desecrated the spirits to claim the land. They take the child, Thomas. Every time. It's not coincidence. It's payment. My mind raced back to the afternoon's ride up the ridge when I'd slipped away and pried open the boarded shaft. The air down there had reeked of damp earth and something metallic like blood long dried. I'd found the bones first. Small, fragile, wrapped in faded calico. Then the carvings on the walls, symbols that twisted my gut, promising vengeance on the blood that spilled the first. He took a step closer, his boots scraping the floor. Eliza was mad. The mind fever took her mind before her body. But his voice wavered, and in the lantern's flicker, I caught the glint of fear in his eyes. Or was it hunger? The air thickened, pressing on my chest, and for a moment I swore I heard whispers, faint as wind through pines calling my name. My hand went instinctively to my belly, the swell there a secret I'd kept from even him, hoping against the pattern that this time would break it. Stay back, I warned, swinging again. He dodged quicker than I expected and grabbed my wrist. Pain shot up my arm as the poker clattered to the floor. His grip was iron, pinning me against the wall, his breath hot on my neck. You don't understand, he murmured, almost pleading. It's the land. It gives silver, but it demands. I tried to stop it, sealed the shaft years ago, but it calls. His free hand hovered over my abdomen, and I twisted, knee driving into his thigh. He grunted, loosening just enough for me to wrench free. I bolted for the table, snatching the journal and a flint from the shelf. Then we'll end it. Together. But as I struck the spark, aiming for the oil lamp to buy time, he lunged. We grappled, the cabin spinning in a blur of shouts and thuds, my mind screaming that this was the night. The 9-month mark ticking like a fuse. Outside, thunder rumbled over the Rockies, promising rain that would flood the mines and unearth what we'd buried too long. He pinned me again, his weight crushing, but I clawed at his face, drawing blood. Fight it, Thomas. You're not them. His eyes cleared for a split second, horror dawning, and he rolled off, gasping. I scrambled up, grabbing the poker once more, but the door rattled, not from us. Something scratched from outside, insistent like nails on wood. The whispers grew louder, swirling in my ears. Give the blood. Thomas staggered to his feet, face ashen. The shaft. We have to go back, now. For the first time I believed him, not the heir to the curse, but a man breaking under it. I nodded, heart pounding, as we burst into the storm-lashed night, the ridge looming like a grave marker. The baby kicked, fierce and alive, reminding me what we stood to lose. But as lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the mine's black maw, I wondered if ingenuity alone could outwit the dead. The lantern's flame flickered as I knelt beside Eliza's grave, the fresh earth still damp from last night's rain. 9 months to the day, same as the others. My hands trembled, not from the cold biting through my coat, but from the weight of it all crashing down. Father, grandfather, great-grand before him. The Thornhill curse, they called it in whispers around Silver Creek. But I knew better now. It wasn't spirits or bad luck. It was him. Uncle Elias, lurking in the shadows of our family ledger like a fox in the henhouse. I'd found the journal hidden in the attic rafters that morning, its leather cover cracked like old skin. Elias's handwriting, meticulous and venomous, spelling out the doses. Arsenic in the wedding wine, just enough to quicken a child, then fester slow over months. For the bloodline's purity, he'd written, as if poisoning his own kin made him some twisted patriarch. The wives, strong women, all of them, carried the heir, only to wither when the babe was due. And the sons? Weak like me, or worse. I stood, mud caking my boots, and scanned the tree line. Elias thought me a fool, too grief-stricken to notice his smug glances at the funeral. But I'd played the part, let him think the line would bend to his will. Now, with the ranch hands scattered for the cattle drive and the townfolk nursing their hangovers, the house stood empty save for us. Him, me, and the truth I'd unearthed. The back door creaked open as I approached, and there he was, silhouetted in the kitchen glow, stirring a pot like nothing had changed. Nephew, he said, voice smooth as riverstone. Come for supper? Eliza's passing weighs heavy, but life goes on. I stepped inside, the door thudding shut behind me. The air smelled of stew and something sharper, bitter almonds maybe. My pulse hammered, but I kept my face blank, mirroring his calm. Life does, uncle, but not like this. Not anymore. He turned, ladle in hand, eyes narrowing just a fraction. What's that mean, boy? You've been mooning about like a lost calf. I pulled the journal from my coat, letting it slap onto the table. Pages fluttered open to the damning entries. Dates, measurements, the wives' names crossed out like debts settled. His face didn't pale. It hardened, a predator sizing up a threat. You think this changes anything? He sneered, setting the ladle down. The Thornhills need strong blood. Your father's line was muddied, soft like you. I fixed it. The ranch, the legacy, it's mine to safeguard. I circled the table, keeping the knife block in reach. Safeguard? By killing them? Eliza was carrying our son, Uncle. My son, not your experiment. He lunged first, faster than I expected for a man his age, fingers clawing for the book. I dodged, grabbing a chair to swing it between us. Wood splintered against his shoulder, and he grunted, staggering back. Fool, without me, we're nothing. The banks circling, the Comanches at the borders. Without you, I cut in, voice steady despite the fire in my chest. We're free. I snatched the knife, its blade catching the light. He froze, then laughed low and mocking. You won't use it. You're no killer. The stew bubbled over, hissing on the stove. I thought of Eliza's last breath, her hand clutching mine, whispering of the child we'd never hold. Grit filled my throat. Not fear, but resolve, the kind that turns boys into men out here on the frontier. You're right, I said, stepping closer. But I don't have to be. The struggle was quick, brutal. His fists against my blade, blood slicking the floorboards. When it ended, Elias slumped against the wall, gasping, the journal clutched in his dying grip. I knelt not to help, but to watch the light fade from his eyes. The curse broken, but the cost carved deep. A bloodline tainted, a family hollowed. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, carrying the first flakes of snow. I'd bury him at dawn, unmarked. The ranch would stand, but I'd sell it come spring. Start fresh, away from Colorado's ghosts. For Eliza, for the son we lost, and for the man I finally became. The wind howled through the canyon like a banshee, whipping dust into my eyes as I crested the ridge, the lantern swinging wild in my grip. Below, the Thornhill ranch sprawled under a bruised sky, its timbers groaning against the storm, and there she was, Eleanor, my wife of 9 months exactly, standing at the edge of the poisoned well, her silhouette sharp as a knife. Her hand rested on the swell of her belly, our child kicking life into her even now, but her eyes. God, those eyes held the family's secret like a loaded revolver. I'd chased the truth across half of Colorado, from dusty saloons where old prospectors whispered of the curse to the hidden ledgers in Elias Thornhill's study, tallying wives like livestock. Abigail, dead in childbirth after swallowing nightshade-laced tea. Clara, bled out from a fall that smelled of arsenic. And now Eleanor, pale and resolute, the pattern unbroken unless I shattered it. The bloodline wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was poisoned by greed. Elias's doing, ensuring no heir diluted his silver mine fortune. But I'd found the antidote in an old miner's journal tucked away in the attic. Milk thistle and charcoal, bitter as regret. Elias, I bellowed, my voice cracking over the gale as I stumbled down the slope, boots sliding on loose shale. He emerged from the barn, shotgun leveled, his face a mask of paternal fury, the same one that had welcomed me into the family with false warmth. It's over. I know what you've done, every dose, every lie. He laughed, a dry rattle like bones in the wind. Boy, you think a journal proves anything? The Thornhills endure because we choose who carries the name. She's next, same as the others. 9 months and the babe goes with her. Eleanor turned, her gaze locking on mine, not with fear, but with the fire I'd seen in her when we first met. Sketching maps of unclaimed veins under lantern light. She didn't speak. Instead, she hurled the vial of tainted water he'd forced on her into the well, the splash echoing like a verdict. I lunged forward, tackling Elias as thunder cracked overhead, the shotgun blasting wide into the dirt. We rolled, fists flying, his ringed knuckles splitting my lip, but I pinned him, the journal's pages fluttering from my coat like damning evidence. Drink this, I gasped to Eleanor as I shoved the antidote pouch into her hands, the herbs I'd brewed from the journal's recipe spilling like salvation. She nodded, downing it without hesitation, her free hand clutching a jagged rock from the ground, ready to fight if he rose again. Elias spat blood, glaring up at me. You'll ruin us all. No, I said, binding his wrists with the lasso from my saddle.
We'll rebuild.
Without the poison. By dawn, the sheriff's men hauled him away, the storm broken into a hesitant sun. Eleanor leaned against me on the porch. Our child's heart beat a steady drum against my side. The ranch no longer a grave, but a fragile promise. The bloodline would change, not end. Carved by choices, not curses, though the shadows of those 9-month graves lingered in every creak of the floorboards. We'd plant new seeds here, watch them grow untainted, but I'd never sleep easy again knowing how close we'd dance to the abyss.